All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 121 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I have my regular co-host, Ian Cummer from Moscow, a suburb in Moscow. I've got one of our returning special guests, Leo Zhao from East Berlin. I guess it's just Berlin these days, but it is the eastern part.
Unfortunately.
And Slava is joining us from Chicago. She's also a returning guest, and we really appreciate both of you guys coming on. Leo came up with our title for today's episode. Can anybody guess the relevance of our title, which is Dumb and Dumber? Where do you think we're headed with this title?
Somewhere
It's related
very intelligent territory, I'm sure, and very joyous, I'm sure. Everyone's feeling the joy. Woo! The economy is great.
Strength through joy.
Joy. The economy is great. There are no wars anywhere. U.S. military is not anywhere in the world except, like taking naps and, in Fort Lauderdale or wherever they are. Yeah, everything's great and we have no problems.
The vibes are good. It's all about vibes. Reality, we want to not really talk about reality. We'll focus on this contrived vibe that we're going to set, and that's how we're going to win selections. So, I mean, I assume you're referring to Kamala, and, that was part of her campaign was like, joy and a total disregard for the reality of things and for even having a policies or a a platform that is you're able to understand what her positions are, so electoral spectacle 2024. I mean, what are our thoughts? I know Ian just put up an article. I read it about an hour ago, his thoughts on the election. We can definitely talk about that. And I'm sure each one of us has a perspective and opinion. So who would like to go first? Anybody want to go first?
Well, first of all, I would just like to say, many communists or Marxists typically say it doesn't matter who wins. The working class loses, right? I mean, of course, it's true to an extent. On some level, it's very, very much true. The working class at home in the imperial core loses, and the working class abroad in the victim countries of imperialism loses even more, no matter who wins. Of course, this is true, but it's a bit lazy to just say that because that's literally true of all bourgeois democracies since the beginning of time, and every single one of them. That you can say that about every single election in the Western world and in South Korea or Japan. So specifically, of course, it does matter in many, many ways, right? In many, many important ways. Which global conflict is going to expand rapidly or subside? How much longer do we have until a global seismic disruption of the global economy, or if there will be one? The U.S. American people, whether they might, have a little bit of respite from their suffering, or not, or will things get rapidly worse? So I think there are many, many factors that does make it a sort of important election.
So you're saying there's important differences. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap. I mean, they're all imperialists, they're all pro-capitalist, but there's differences in how things might play out depending on which one wins, if you want to call it, or is selected, if you prefer selected to wins, But what do you want to elaborate? Like, I mean, do you want to be specific about differences that we could expect depending on who wins, or is that are we getting too?
Well, we can definitely talk about the specific differences. imagine most of the show we will go over that. And I just want to say one more thing, that bugs me about some communists. I mean, it's the narcissism of small differences, right? Some people that are very much similar to me that I I'm annoyed with. This notion of sort of being selected, right? That it's all predetermined by a deep state, and doesn't there are just puppets and on a stage reading lines. I mean, come on. Sure, maybe it's true to an extent, but history plainly shows that these figureheads do make decisions. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's just another bit of lazy thinking, I think. Very borderline conspiratorial.
And I've definitely been guilty of falling into both of those approaches. But no, your point is taken, because they are true to an extent, but it is also lazy to an extent. So that's very points well taken. Ian, let's
Well, I do want to say I agree with that last point, especially. I mean, I agree with most of it, especially that last point. That I see that all the time. That it's all theater, and there's this shadowy cabal of elites who decide everything, and they're all in every public disagreement is an act. And I don't agree with that at all. I think there is uncertainty, and there's disagreements, and even very powerful people in the same country, let alone in different countries. But even in the same country, you can have very serious feuds, actual blood feuds. I mean, I think there's a lot of historical basis for it. I mean, no one would go back, look at Rome. No one would look at Rome and say, oh, it was all a conspiracy. No, they literally killed each other. The patrician wars, they literally executed each other, executed their whole families. I mean, it was a civil war. So I don't think there's any basis for this idea that the money class, that the ownership class are all this hegemonic entity that agree on everything and don't fight amongst themselves. I don't think that's true at all.
Yeah, I think that there's different layers to all this madness, right? Yes, there are people up on top who are making the most important decisions, right? And the foreign policies of United States are not changing every 4 years, right? They remain the same, imperialistic, hegemonic, whatever. But they do allow these little people or big people, depending how you want to call them, Trump, Kamala, whatever, whoever becomes president, they do allow them to bicker at each other. They allow them to fight, and yeah, you can call that a show, a bit, because it is to a certain extent. But in the end of the day, they do make decisions to invade or not to invade, to kill Soleimani or not to kill, right? So they are allowed to make these things, and it would be silly if they weren't. They have to maintain this illusion of democracy and everything working and everything like that. So I would say that both is true. Yes, it on some extent, to some extent, it doesn't matter, because foreign policy, invasion of other countries and exploitation, all of that will continue. It will be different depending on who becomes the president, but it will continue still. So, and on the other hand, regarding domestic policies, yes, it will change a lot depending on who becomes. So for people that it's important to improve certain things of their life, I understand why people would want to go. I completely understand why people vote for Trump. With liberals, it's a little bit harder for me to understand their lane of reasoning. But Trump supporters, I get it. I understand that they are tired of seeing this nonsense, and economy is so bad. So I can sympathize with people who are in Trump supporters, and then with Kamala supporters, I'm mad at them. I'm like, you're voting just because you want to do an abortion? For me, that's completely unacceptable.
What about Slava? Who do you think is going to end up winning? So I think I've been on record. My guess, and I don't have certainty, I don't even have much certainty, but I'm guessing Trump will win, and that's just based on the last couple of weeks where they've the discourse has changed a little bit, and it seems that he's acceptable. And then I have a lot of reasons why I think they would like they being the ruling establishment consensus would like to put him in power. I think there's benefits that Trump provides that Kamala doesn't.
Mhm.
And I won't speak for anyone else, but what about you? Who will we even get an answer by the end of tonight about who won, or is it going to drag on for days? And
No,
then who do you think is the ultimate?
yeah,
who's gonna be-
I think by numbers Trump is going to win, but if they're gonna allow him to become a winner, I don't know, because they're really pushing Kamala. And like I would prefer Trump to win actually, because he is promising to end the war in Ukraine and all of that. I don't know if he's going to follow up on that or not, but with Kamala, I don't know. Her promises are nothing. It's a nothing cookie. So like, what's the use, of her becoming a president? I don't get it. But yeah, I don't know. For months and months, I was predicting Trump to win because I saw how Ukraine is losing and they want to save face in Ukraine. I think I mentioned this on this show before, that they're gonna use Trump as a scapegoat, to blame Ukraine losing on Trump just so they can save face. So I was thinking about that for all these months, but now seeing how much they're pushing Kamala and how they're trying to rig it, I think they're not gonna let Trump win. So I don't know. We'll see.
And then things will get really interesting.
I think, because Billy Bob and I have been having this ongoing discussion, and he flip-flopped. You flip-flopped a couple weeks ago. And the reason I didn't flip-flop is one, I'm stubborn, I think. But also I don't see, the things I was saying a month ago are to me still true. I didn't see any compelling evidence that the stuff we were saying a month ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago are not true anymore, right? Kamala Harris is definitely, the establishment candidate, Democrats, and even mainstream Republicans tend to, for the most part, there are exceptions, but mainstream Republicans tend to they prefer her more. Even that's the big selling point of the Kamala Harris campaign, that, look at all these generals, George Bush, Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney. Like, I wouldn't even say that out loud. Like, I would kill myself out of embarrassment if George Bush agreed with me on anything. It's so embarrassing that the allegedly left-wing party of the Democrat, of the United States, is so proud to have all these look at all these corporations that agree with us. It's just so embarrassing. It's so incredibly. I'm sorry, my dog is barking.
That's okay.
But
neoconservatives too.
They all love him. Like, there are exceptions. Like Lindsey Graham apparently likes Trump. Not to please don't confuse that with me liking Lindsey Graham. I don't. But there are, which is interesting that he still likes Trump more than Kamala. But for the most part, these guys tend to prefer Kamala. So I think it's safe to say she's the establishment candidate. And the main thing is they've been going on and on and on that Trump is literally worse than Hitler. Like, Trump is going to annex Poland, like he's going to invade Poland, and that's that's my interpretation. Like, Trump is so much like Hitler, he's actually going to annex Poland.
Why would he talk about peace then, right?
Right.
He keeps talking, that he wants to stop the war in Palestine. He wants to stop the war in Ukraine, and they're calling him fascist. Like, is that what fascism is now?
Well, it's so strange because, I think it's true with every country. Like, there's, regardless of what, like, every country has a list of other countries that they could potentially have a war with. I think everybody knows that. Like, maybe, like, I know, like, Leo, definitely, you can speak up here. Like, Leo was like, okay, we a long time ago had that feud with Vietnam. Okay, we've had those border problems with India. Like, there's we might have to go to war over Taiwan with the USA. So every country has this list of, okay, we understand there might be a war with this other country. Not that they necessarily want a war with that other country, but it's a thing that could theoretically happen. It wouldn't like surprise people if it happened. I think that's true in just about every country, to include Russia. But what's weird about the USA is that, we're not at war, but act like we're at war. So like, and we have these loyalty pledges. Like, of course, Trump loves Israel for some reason, even though he's running for the president of the USA, not the president of Israel. But it was weird, like even during the debates, like they were trying to get Trump to, and they did this multiple times, to try to get him to pledge allegiance to Ukraine. And it's just like, Trump is love him or hate him. I understand if you hate him for sure, but he's running for the president of the USA, not the president of Ukraine. He doesn't need to say he likes Ukraine. He can say he hates Ukraine. That's okay because he's not the president of Ukraine. Ukraine is not a US ally. It's not even in NATO. There's no obligation for a president of the USA to do anything for Ukraine. In 2021, I even remember there was a Tucker Carlson interview that Democrats got mad about. This was before, the special military operation. This was like in the winter of 2021, where he was like, why should we side with Ukraine? Why not side with Russia? Which I think is they got so mad about. It's a completely fair question. If you have two countries that you're not allied with, you don't have an obligation to either of them. Why not just pick the one that is most benefit, so it's amazing that we have this weird system where it's like a loyalty oath to a country besides yours. It's really
well, here's where the puppeteers come in. Is valid because that is the grand strategy of U.S. imperialism that has been set out since 1946, very literally. Right, the U.S. Entered World War II in order to take the throne of world hegemony, in order to go after the holy grail of world domination, and they set out a plan to destroy the Soviet Union first of all, and any rival power, to disrupt global trade, to cut off global trade. Well, that process started with the Portuguese in like fucking 1450. But to cut off global trade even more, to prevent the rise of a Eurasianist power, right? To cut off. That's why they went into Afghanistan, to disrupt the trade between Asia and Europe. So I'm sorry to bring it to these a little bit big, far scope, but the war in Ukraine, I mean, and Israel, and controlling the probably single piece of most geostrategically important territory on the planet, which is Western Asia or the Middle East. So like allegiance, the U.S. will never give up that piece of territory or allow Arabic unity and integration. Will never allow trade to flow freely through that region, the oil and everything else. So these are just massive, epic plans that have been set in motion for decades and decades. So that's why Israel, right? And the question is whether Ukraine is similar reasons, of course. But right now the question is just whether that's which one is more, or not which one, but Israel is definitely worthwhile for the I'm not going to say globalist, for the capitalist globalists, for the excuse me, for the bourgeois globalists.
Yes,
they will never give that up. But whether Ukraine is costing them too much, that it's time to give up, is the question.
So Ian brought up the point that, in a vacuum, shouldn't a president of a given country be able to advocate for either one of a warring country, based on whatever reasons? But he's looking at things in a vacuum, right? There's a context. And so I was going to say the same thing kind of Leo did. I was going to say, well, there's a context to what's going on. And that context is, reality, the historic reality since the end of World War II, where the U.S. has, tried to attain, global hegemony. And with the dissolution of the Soviet Union and Russia being an obstacle, and Russia's sovereignty is an obstacle to Western domination and Western hegemony. So that's the likely, that's the whole reason for the coup in Ukraine, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in a vacuum, it just makes sense that, hey, why can't Trump say that? But in reality, of course, the entire establishment is going to, go after Trump if he says something like that, and which of course is what happened. But like I think what Slava said, I agree with her that they might want to hand this failed situation to Trump so they can blame Trump for whatever negotiation he ends up agreeing to with Russia, with Ukraine. And they could just say, well, it's all Trump's fault because he was the one that capitulated. So that's kind of my prediction, is that's one of the reasons why they like Trump. But also on Israel, I think one of the reasons Trump is doing good in the polls is because, or better, like I think in the last couple of weeks, there's just been a difference in the narrative where Trump is considered acceptable and even a possible winner, whereas before that he wasn't. I think that has to do with his over-the-top rhetoric, where he's supporting Israel and being really bellicose against Iran in a way that Kamala isn't. And I think that excites a lot of the pro-Israel crowd. And let's face it, the pro-Israel lobby has influence and power. And I think that might be the reason that puts him over the top today. And that's my conjecture. That's my opinion. But it could be totally mistaken.
I think the main thing is that there's, and in a minute, hey, Billy Bob, do you know how to share a screen in a minute? Do you want to share the?
I can, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, so not quite yet. But I was going to say the main reason I think that's not the case is because, as Christie said, quoting Slava, actually, how can, how can you say a candidate is like Hitler and then allow that candidate to win? And we can't just think of U.S. politics. We have to think of, it's a globalist gray blob, right? It would be a huge loss of credibility, right? Because any regime, especially if it's an empire, needs stability. That your shareholders, especially outside of the imperial court, need to have confidence that the people running the show are competent. And what are European, especially European shareholders, other NATO shareholders, what are they going to say if after the Biden administration making all these promises that Trump ends up at the helm? And I even see this in social media. Like Europeans are I'm sure, Leo, I'd be curious to hear from you actually how Germans are reacting, because I look at Facebook and they're in panic right now. They're hysterical right now. What do you think?
If for no other reason, there are other reasons, but if for no other reason, I want Trump to win just to own the fucking European liberals.
Yes.
Just to see them like completely have a meltdown, have a schizo fucking episode. Like,
I was thinking the same thing. Yes.
I just want to say that one of the things that made me think that they're not going to allow Trump to become, and they're going to, push Kamala, is because they were trying to open another front for Russia, right, in Georgia. They were trying their best to mess in Georgian politics. And earlier this year, there were protests, I think in March. And then later on, like last month, when they had elections happening, right? Parliamentary elections. And I thought that, if they succeed, if the Western, all these backed liberals get over, in Georgia and win and take power, right? That's going to cause another conflict. So it will provoke Russia. Most likely, there will be another chaos, another war happening. And that would be like a distraction from Ukraine. Ukraine will go on the back burner, kind of frozen conflict, stuff like that. Then they're not going to need Trump to blame, right? Ukraine failure. But so I don't know, like I can't tell what exactly their intentions are. Maybe they're just going with the flow. They're like, okay, we're gonna try this. If it pans out, then we will go with, we'll make this decision. But if it doesn't pan out, then we'll readjust. So I don't think they're all that smart and they're planning like in a chess, and they're like 5 steps ahead. I don't think so. They're still dumb, like the name of our show. So I think they are going with the flow, and depending on what's happening in their puppet states, right, they're readjusting their foreign policy.
Yes,
I think they have
that's
no
true.
plan.
I think that's very true because, like what you mentioned with George, I don't unfortunately remember who said this. I hope someone else in the show remembers, but I remember somebody, maybe it was their prime minister. I don't remember who said this, but he was talking about how the USA, the delegation from the USA, was trying to pressure Georgia, like Slava said, to open up a second front. And the Georgians said, well, what good would that do? We would only last 3 or 4 days. And the Americans said, oh, don't worry, we'll support you in a guerrilla war. It's like, well, what a great deal. We lose our country. We literally get conquered, but you'll give us weapons for a guerrilla war so we can distract Russia. What an amazing deal. Like, who could say no to that offer?
Yeah, I'm happy that Georgians are smarter than Ukrainians, and they're not falling for it, and they're fighting their ruling party, Georgian Dream. I mean, of course, the West is claiming that they're pro-Russian, but they're
not.
They're just reading from history. The head of their party admitted, he's like, we saw what happened in Ukraine. We saw what Maidan have caused. We don't want to repeat the fate of Ukraine. So, that doesn't make them pro-Russian. That just make them smart, intelligent people. They don't want bad stuff happening to their country. So I'm happy that whatever was planned for Georgia didn't work.
Yeah, it seems that they've succeeded and that they haven't succumbed to, being governed by a pro-European vassal that's just going to implement the guerrilla war from the forest.
Their president is still a puppet. Unfortunately, she's right. Their version of dumb.
Isn't she like French or something? She's like a French person who's the Georgian president. That is really great news for humanity that Georgia is making the right decision. And so the concern is you have Marcos in the Philippines, you have this puppet in Taiwan, you've got a puppet government in Japan, and then they're trying to work with the Lebanese government to side with Israel and turn on Hezbollah. So everywhere the imperialists are out trying to get control over these very important governments and get them to suicide their country on behalf of Western imperialism. And so it's an ongoing struggle, and you see them having success in certain countries, and then thankfully, like in Georgia, they're not having success. But Ukraine ought to be an example of why not to do that. You would think, you would hope.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, I was just going to add a quick note. There are some signs that the probably the most faithful imperial lapdog or attack dog, Japan, there may be some signs that they are kind of moving towards some sort of independent foreign policy.
Their economy is struggling tremendously, and China can help. China is their number one trade partner, so it's just stupid for them to suicide themselves.
Absolutely.
So I hope you're right.
So Billy Bob, do you want to share that blog post?
Yes.
So
am I going to share your article, right?
Right. You're just going to put it on the screen.
I can do that.
Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about this real quick because it goes into a few points I wanted to make here. So this is on the blog, The Reading Junkie. And I picked that photo of Elon Musk because he looks like an idiot. And that was just the best microcosm, I thought, for the Trump campaign that I could find, even though it's just, I couldn't find a better photo than that one. So basically, I'm very convinced that, like I said earlier, that Trump's not going to win. They're going to get Kamala Harris. And the main reasons, I went into that, you can't say someone's Hitler for 4 years and then elect him. But also it's just all of the institutions that matter, the intelligence agencies, the military, the FBI. They're all pretty firmly in the Democrats' pockets now. I go into some detail about the military. I just think the cultural shift, like, because traditionally the military is always a very right wing, very conservative, Christian nationalist type organization, but it's not really true anymore. They've gone woke, and we've talked about the woke military before, and I don't think it's like, oh, the military is soft or anything like that. I just think the military's transitioned to the new forever war, because Democrats are the new forever war party. So
no pun intended with transition. No pun intended.
Yes, no pun. That wasn't actually intentional. Yes, no pun intended with transitioning. And also I did unfortunately watch that Arizona rally with Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk and Trump and all those guys. Of course, they said a lot of things I don't agree with, but my main takeaway from that is I didn't see them talk and think, wow, what a competent and well-run campaign. That was not my takeaway from that. It wasn't as bad as the Kamala Harris strength through joy campaign, but it was still kind of cringe. It was more like a NASCAR race than a political rally. And I also go into some detail about that the personality cults. I think the first true because the US, I do talk about the USA was always overly obsessed with the personality of its presidents and its candidates. Like, you even look pretty far back, like the Lincoln Douglas debates, and think we were overly obsessed with how a person looks and how they act rather than his actual policies. I think it really started with Obama, because I was swept up in the Obama craze. But looking back, I really realized it was a personality cult. He's kind of a cardboard cutout. There's really no substance to him. I mean, he wasn't, a Kenyan Muslim dictator like people, including Trump, said. But there really wasn't anything to him, too. There's no substance behind the man. And each person they have trotted out since then has gotten progressively worse. Biden was a vegetable. I mean, come on, he was a vegetable even before he ran. He was having those same issues even before he took office. Then, of course, you have Kamala Harris, who is even worse than Biden. And you have Tim Walz, her vice presidential pick, who's even worse than her somehow. I didn't think that was possible. So it's like you have a personality cult without the personality. Like, there was that famous quote about Stalin. Some Western journalist had asked somebody, what do you think of the Stalin personality cult? Say, well, there was the cult, but there was also the personality. Stalin was actually a very special person. If you see him, that there were a lot of people around the world who were very impressed by him as a character. But with these guys, there's just a cult, and they're just they're trying to give everybody that dopamine rush, like from a social media post, like feel joy when you see Kamala Harris. It's like trained Pavlov's dogs. It's incredible. So that's that link's in the description if any of you want to look at it. But that's mine.
Can I interject about the personality?
Yes, absolutely.
Very quickly, just on the other side of the personality thing is the branding. Trump has a solid brand. He's a racist asshole, whatever, but he has a solid brand in the U.S. America that people have known for what, 20, 30 years now, way before he got into politics. And, whether it's true or not, he, has an empire, has a business, whatever, empire, or that's how he's perceived to be. So this versus Kamala's, girl boss, like one-liners, like
I'm speaking, Leo.
Yeah, exactly.
I come from a middle-class background, and
All right.
Yeah. What you say about they cannot allow Hitler, quote unquote, Hitler to win. That's definitely valid, and I think things will get really interesting if they don't allow him to win. I think everything seems to be going in his direction. I mean, the team, people on his team, right? JD Vance. I was just looking over a little bit, skimming JD Vance's book a little bit earlier today, and it's quite kind of touching, actually, because his super poor background and all of this. I mean, that connects to the working class in the USA. Um, and uh, Tulsi Gabbard, of course, has a amazing record of being anti-war. And then RFK, right? A little bit unhinged, but very good on many points as well. The pseudo anti-imperialist points, I would say, not authentic, but anti-war also. And so I just think that it's very strong. It's just looking. I mean, especially compared to the fiasco that is the Democrats. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Trump has great team. I mean, I used to be a fan of Tulsi Gabbard, like 8-10 years ago. She was great back then. She stood for Bernie when everybody was betraying him, right? When she was still young and potential, whatever of candidates in Democratic Party, promising. I forgot how they called those. But anyway, yeah, she went ahead and met with Assad, despite the fact that everyone was against it, and she pissed Hillary so much that Hillary started this whole anti-Tulsi campaign. And so I respected her for that, and she was speaking anti-war and all of that. But then the more she went in, the more they had a talk with her, I guess, and and she changed a bit. So yeah, with Tulsi, she's a questionable person now, but she still has a lot of sympathy among Americans because she's military, and working class Americans, the conservatives, they're pro-military a lot, right, in their core. Therefore, they can sympathize with Tulsi Gabbard. And then with RFK Jr., I mean, he's great on lots of points. Like during COVID, he served as an inspiration for me because I was one of those anti everything. So, and all of my fellow socialists have been calling me anti-science and all of that. And the only people who I had something in common with were the RFK fans, right? The libertarians, conservative people in America. But of course, his stance on Israel is just unforgivable. No matter how much good he did for that health stuff, him being Zionist is a complete no for me. But he is trying to create some sort of health program. They call it MAHA, right? Make America Healthy Again, which I find positive because anyone who they have picked before to promote health stuff, it was actually anti-healthy things. I remember when Michelle Obama was trying to revise school lunches, she just made them unedible. Like kids hate school lunches now in America because of Michelle Obama. So I don't know, maybe RFK Jr. will be able to implement something if Trump wins, of course, but it's we should discuss this, I guess, after the elections.
I wanted to get back briefly to Ian's article. So I read it this morning, and I mean, a great article. I have, of course, a little bit of a different perspective. I know. So Ian kind of just embraces the whole culture war, right? And he sees Democrats versus Republicans is conservatives versus liberals, and this is the basic paradigm, which is the totality of the narrative in the article, and I think that misses something, right? I think that the conservative liberal paradigm, the culture war paradigm, I think there's more to what is going on, and I think there's more important things than what's going on. I think obviously this culture war is exploited, right? It's exploited for all that it's worth. But what are the forces that are exploiting this culture war? And I think that if we think about, obviously, a class analysis and, the ownership class versus the working class, it is in the interest of the oligarchy to stoke and to exploit and manipulate these cultural differences. And I think for myself, I don't think I want to get like, I'm not going to buy into the culture war paradigm. I'm not going to buy into the culture war narratives because I see them as being manipulated and exploited by the ruling class, by the oligarchy, by the ownership class. So, and but again, that's because I'm a communist, and I know Ian's not a communist. But I just wanted to explore these differences in worldviews, explore these differences in perspectives, because I think it's interesting, and I think a lot of viewers might struggle to understand the ideological differences here. But
well, I would say what Leo said was right, that love him or hate him, Trump, and I actually mentioned that exact point in the article too. Trump is Trump, and he didn't change himself. I mean, that's part of, I think, what turns off a lot of people about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, like him, like literally changing her accent based on who she's talking to, like Derek, or how Tim Walz got made fun of a lot because he did that fake hunting trip. I think it was literally because I'm sure they did some survey and said, oh, well, to reach white middle class males in the 25 to 45 age group, they like outdoorsmen, so you should pretend you're an outdoorsman. And he did that ridiculous video where he's pretending.
Who's old enough to see Dukakis in a tank? Does anybody remember Dukakis in the tank?
Yes. I wasn't old enough for it, but I know of when he got in the tank and looked ridiculous.
Same thing.
Yes.
It just really went bad for him.
But with Trump, I mean, he likes what he likes. Like he likes golf, so golf kind of has a mixed reputation. Most people find it boring. It's kind of it's a rich people sport. But Trump really likes golf, so he doesn't hide. He's like, I like golf. I'm going to go play golf. And even people who don't like golf say, well, this dude really enjoys golf. That's like a thing he's into. So people can, even if it's not a hobby they like, this dude has a thing he likes. Or I think the other thing that I think maybe possibly culturally what turns off a lot of these New England Democrats, what makes them so angry, is that Trump, he's not exactly new rich. I don't know much about his family background, but I don't think they're old wealth. I think like they emigrated to the USA, then got wealthy later. So he's like second or third generation rich. So they do a lot of stuff that's the old rich consider tasteless. Like he really likes McDonald's. He loves McDonald's. Like, and it's not a thing you're supposed to do. Like even Kamala Harris, she mentioned, oh, I worked at a McDonald's, which no one actually believes. But they don't do, because it's tasteless, right? Mm-hmm. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have, the $2,000 plate dinners, like Hillary. It's $20,000 plate dinners, like Hillary Clinton did. That's what you're supposed to do. So I think being tasteless is part of what makes them so angry about Trump, is that he's this tasteless new rich type guy who doesn't know how rich people are supposed to behave.
I've heard that it's said about Trump that he's the poor man's idea about how a rich man would behave.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty good.
What do you think of his political stunt that he did at McDonald's? The way he pretended to be working there and serve people. Like, I mean, it's a good move, I think, if you do it right. But I think someone screwed up over there.
I think he did it right. I do think he did it right. I mean, let's take it what it is. Yes, it's a stunt. It's a stunt. Yeah. Of course, it's a stunt. I wouldn't even say that. I wouldn't say it makes Trump look good, but it doesn't make him look bad either. Does anyone remember that photo op where Hillary Clinton visited that working class apartment, and it became a meme, and she just had to, where there was a sink. It was a small, messy apartment. Is what a normal person lives in, and like Hillary Clinton was acting like she was an astronaut on Mars. Like she had this confused and disgusted look on her face.
Yeah, that was a fail. That was epic fail. The Trump McDonald's was a little bit better, perhaps, but everything that has been said in the last 5 minutes or so would be congruent with the sort of classic class analysis of the Democrats and the Republicans today, right? That the Republicans, Trump represents the lower section of the bourgeoisie, or lower to middle, who want national rejuvenation, who wants reindustrialization, who wants the small business, not small business. They don't give a fuck about the small businesses, the medium businesses, to get better, to make some money. And the Democrats are the Silicon Valley tech, which is entangled with the higher level of imperialists, of the bourgeoisie, who wants global hegemony, right? So everything that's been
BlackRock,
said.
Citibank.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say BlackRock, Citibank, the financial elites, the financial class, are more Democrat.
One of our viewers is saying showing up in a garbage truck right after Biden calls his supporters garbage was pure genius. And I agree. Like they do have this connection with their voter base, right? And they always keep in touch. They check the temperature every day, I guess, and scan it. And so Trump is good at like reading room temperature and see what to do. So either him personally or his team, like he has that ability, because I've noticed during his rallies and speeches, he can adjust right away and win more, right? But I'm sure he's not only one doing that. He is picking his team according to his personal tastes.
I will say the Puerto Rico scandal kind of showed the bad side of both sides. So I do think it was because that comedian, I forget his name, that comedian who had made that joke at a Trump rally, that was like, I was like, even when I heard about it, I was turned off by that, because so basically the joke was, this comedian, I forget his name, but this comedian went up and said, he made a joke that, there's this floating pile of garbage in the ocean called Puerto Rico, which is because they are American citizens. It's a U.S. territory. It's not a U.S. state, but it is a U.S. territory. It's not appropriate. It's completely inappropriate. And, maybe there is some bias even on myself saying that, because, if he'd made no, I take that back. Even it's not even a bias thing. It's just like, if you shouldn't make a joke, you wouldn't make that. That's not appropriate to say, like, Alabama is garbage. That's saying Puerto Rico is garbage is equally inappropriate. But it does, but the other side was just, and I say it's kind of illustrates some problems with both sides, because the other side was like, oh, well, no, it's diverse. So it's kind of, on one side, I can understand why a lot of like Republicans, these white Midwest Republicans living in trailers are like, why is Puerto Rico a U.S. territory to begin with? I can see them resenting that. Why are we? Because they do spend a lot of money on Puerto Rico. I understand why there would be resentments in these, and they would find the joke funny just because they're bitter and it. I mean, it's not appropriate for Trump to deliberately fan those ethnic tensions. It's not appropriate. But then when you have the other side of it, where Democrats are like, well, blah, 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 blah. It's, you can't just make a joke like that. And it's just like, but at the same time, it's a legitimate, it's not an appropriate joke to make at a campaign rally, but it's a legitimate criticism. Why do we have this weird relationship with Puerto Rico? It's a legitimate point to bring up. But you ask Democrats, they say the whole world, like, the globe is a map of the USA. We're personally responsible for everything in the whole world. And it's like, well, you're not. You're responsible for the people in your country, and it's your responsibility stops at the border. And then, right. So I don't know if I'm making sense there. Sorry, but
I don't think the comedian meant anything other than to shock and offend people. I mean, that's kind of what
it was.
Does.
Cheap shock value. Yes.
So maybe it was inappropriate to have him on. It was a 6-hour-long rally at Madison Square Garden, and this guy is a pretty well-known roaster. And so, Trump, the team, probably Trump had nothing to do with it. I mean, they decided to hire him, and he said some very racy things. But I mean, of course, the Democrats are going to seize on that. And I wanted to bring up that point as well. It's like, all this talk about Hitler, you can see it as the normal partisan politics. It's a little bit more extreme than normal, true, but I don't see it as representative of the entire establishment consensus opposed to Trump, and with the again with the polling in the past couple of weeks and the discourse changing, saying Trump could win, and different things that are positive for Trump in the media, which you would otherwise not see if there was the whole consensus against him. And so I just kind of think with the Hitler thing, because we did talk about that for a while, that could be chalked up to just regular partisan politics and not really illustrative of a desire that he really not be in office. But I guess I changed the subject a little when I went to that topic.
I think for the establishment, they do want someone like Trump to run and to rally the masses and to excite people, because when things are getting worse, right? Economy is terrible, everything. People lose hope and become like they don't want to vote, they don't want to participate anymore, right? And with throughout the years, we see that voter turnout is getting smaller and smaller in numbers. So they need Trump. Like Trump is helping the establishment to bring back hope for people, right? They're like, okay, we're gonna work hard, we're gonna go and vote for Trump, we're gonna change things, because at the end of the day, I don't know how much you will agree with me on this, but I think that the most what the establishment, every government of any country is scared of is their own population. Like they don't want the population to rebel. So therefore they need to keep things in check. And if suddenly a big number of people, I don't know, 90% of people don't come to vote and say, that's it, we can't change anything, we're not voting, that's going to scare the hell out of them. they're gonna realize that they're not controlling things anymore, right? So they'll have to take some new measures, and therefore this whole Trump situation is playing good for them, regardless if they're going to allow him to win or not. But the whole process, pre-election process, I think it's serving the establishment perfectly. Like it keeps people busy talking and all that, and nobody's actually thinking of the most important things.
I'd say the big takeaway here is that there are very, very crucial steps and decisions that are going to need to be made within the next 4 years, and they need to have their guy as the president. They can't afford to not have their guy as the president. There's Ukraine, of course, there's Iran, there's all this stuff, and you can argue on the merits, but I say the biggest, for me, the single biggest issue that as far as threatening the USA and the US government and the rules-based world order, as Boris Johnson and Liz Truss like to call it, like that's like their favorite term, is the debt and the dollar. And there was something I'm going to, whoops, I didn't mean to turn off the camera. There is a link I'm just going to post into the comments here, which people can read at their leisure. But there was a very interesting Trump interview a few days ago where he was, and it was almost like a joke. So it's one of those things when Trump says stuff, it's hard to say if he's being serious or for some bullshit he just pulled out of his ass at the moment. But he said basically that we could pay off the debt with Bitcoin. I don't think that's literally going to happen. Of course, it's a Trumpism, that's not literally what's going to happen, but you can see, okay, I can see, and I think that's actually something Billy Bob's said before. Trump says the quiet part out loud. He says the blunt truth about stuff and that you're not supposed to say. And that's part of the reason they don't like it, because he sits in on these meetings, like especially when he was president, he would sit in on these meetings and then blurt it out. Everyone's like, you're not supposed, you idiot. You're not supposed to say it to everybody. You're not supposed to go to these secret meetings and then put it out on Twitter an hour later when you're taking a dump after the meeting. But he basically said that. So I think, and there's a lot of people speculating on this. What is the USA going to do with de-dollarization? What are we going to do with this debt? And there's basically two options. So one option is to basically become like Greece, just turn into this restructure our whole economy. So we're paying off the debt, doing nothing else. All these other pet projects like pensions, welfare, Medicare, wars, everything else just goes out the window. We're just paying down the debt and nothing else. That's no fun. No one wants to do that. The other option is to try some sort of sleight of hand to get out of paying the debt. And I've seen theories out now. I don't think anyone exactly knows how they're going to do that. War is one. Some sort of global economic crisis, which could be triggered by a war. So they're not mutually exclusive choices by any means. Crypto is another one. Because I remember when crypto first came out and libertarians were just crapping their pants with excitement about how this was going to challenge, state-sanctioned currencies. It was going to be, the everyman's currency. I see Leo rolling his eyes. Yes, it's a natural response whenever you hear a libertarian saying something. But the main reason we know that's BS is because if it was such a threat to the rules-based world order, of course, they would have cracked down on it. They didn't. Bitcoin's flourishing. All these cryptocurrencies and shit coins are flourishing. And I've also noticed, because I use crypto, not because I like crypto, but because of sanctions. I want to access my money, so I have to use crypto to get access to my money. I just say I have to use crypto. I don't like crypto, but I have to use it. I've noticed it's been increasingly regulated. Like, it's not, in 2010 to that, or whenever it first started coming out, it was kind of, the heroin and the heroin and illegal weapons trades type currency to evade the law. That's increasingly not true. It is increasingly regulated. So it makes me think that it is part of the plan, and that might play into how they're planning to get out of this financial crisis. So I say all that to say that they need their guy. They need their guy in the pilot seat, in the Oval Office. They don't want someone who's untrustworthy. I think especially foreign shareholders don't want someone they don't like and don't trust in the Oval Office when those decisions are made.
I mean, even Russia, right? Who was it? Was it Lavrov or Peskov? I think Peskov, who said, we prefer Kamala because she's more predictable. We can read her, right? With Trump, you never know. So even though the whole, Western establishment is saying Trump is the Putin's guy and puppet and whatever, but they are admitting that for them it's better to have Democrats in power because they're predictable.
Now,
to answer this question, Ian, do you report your crypto activities on your federal tax returns, as is now required? Well, the interesting thing about crypto is that it becomes a tax event when you withdraw it. And so you can make all the money you want. By the way, I just use crypto to transfer my money. I'm too dumb to even understand how this works. So I just transfer it in and transfer it out. I don't try to make a profit on it. But I will say it only becomes a tax event that you report when you withdraw it. And I withdraw it in Russia. So that's all I'll say on that subject.
So you were talking about the fear of how the conservatives, the Republican Party, doesn't understand that the Democrats are going to take over the country and they're going to become the ruling uniparty. And that's another kind of idea that I think I disagree with, because I think they really need two parties and they really need the Republicans to play off the Democrats. And Trump is great. Like Slava said, Trump is great for the establishment because they don't have to promise anything. Like the Democrats don't have to run on any kind of platform other than I'm anti-Trump. And this is great for the oligarchs because they don't want to have to provide health care or jobs or, access to, cheap groceries. They don't want to do that. They just want to be able to run. Hey, I'm not this devil incarnate. I'm not the next Hitler. So you got to vote for me because I'm not Hitler. So I think that plays out. And then I know Slava talked about the voter turnout, and it's like I can see both sides. I can see how they want people to participate, but at the same time, I can see how they want to suppress participation by the fact that they don't make it a public holiday. Usually for the presidential election, which is the biggest election in the country, it's still only between 60 and 70% turnout. And then most congressional elections are less than 50% turnout of eligible voters. So they really, they don't really want us involved. They're happy to have us vote because it's cathartic for us and we can tell ourselves, yeah, it is a democracy, just like they tell us, because I'm voting. What do you mean that's not a democracy? But they, at the same time, they're happy to suppress it. They don't want to make it a public holiday, and they don't want people really involved, because if people were really involved, they would discover that nothing ever changes and their vote doesn't matter in the election. The whole democratic process is illegitimate. But
I see some comments, not to interject, but I see some comments on Putin. So it is true. Putin did endorse Kamala, like Slava said, but one, of course, it's trolling. We all know it's trolling. They know because Trump is the Putin asset. He's working for Russia. So that was a bit of trolling to say, well, actually, we prefer Kamala. And I think ultimately the Russian position is, and this came up in the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson, where Putin had. And this was when he had just apparently pretty recently after he had become president, where Putin had become president. So he was still pretty young and wet behind the ears, kind of naively coming up to Clinton at a party or something, or a conference. He was like, oh, hey, could Russia join NATO? Like, oh my gosh, so cute. You think Russia can join NATO? It's so adorable. And then Clinton actually incidentally said, well, yes, with his southern drawl. I was like, oh, I was here. Why not? Hell, why not? That, because anyone's listened to Bill Clinton does that. He's got that, that accent. And then he came back kind of embarrassed later. Well, actually, you see here, the problem is actually Russia can't join NATO. So Putin kind of realized from that conversation that somebody above Clinton had basically told him, no, absolutely not. And that's when he realized the president does not have as much control as is advertised. So I think that's if you read between the lines of Putin's so-called endorsement of Kamala, I think that's what he's really saying. We understand that whichever figurehead is, not to say it's irrelevant who the president is, but a decision like that, because the thing is, Russia cannot end that special military operation in Ukraine until they have a lasting settlement. Something that's going to change as soon as you get a new president is not a lasting sentence. So what I think he really means is someone who is actually in a position of authority when the actual political mechanism, the deep state, if you will, comes forward and says, okay, we accept your demands on Ukraine. Here is a deal. And, that's, I think, the only, and I think they understand that decision will be made regardless of who wins the election. So that's my take on the Putin.
Yeah, but I think with Trump, if by some miracle he wins, there will be more chances for negotiations and talks and stuff like that, because he keeps pushing that narrative, right? He always talks about it. Anytime there's talks about Ukraine, Trump brings up the fact that I'm going to finish it in one day. Of course, nothing's going to happen in one day. That's unrealistic. But Zelensky doesn't like Trump. The whole Ukrainian population, they hate Trump, and they're afraid of, just like European liberals, they're afraid of Trump becoming president. When Zelensky was here a couple of months ago, he visited the United States and he met with Trump. I don't know if you remember that. BBC reached out to me and asked me, as a member of Ukrainian diaspora, they're like, we want to know your opinion. What do you think of this, Trump meeting Zelensky, and how do you think it's going to change anything or not, and who's better for Ukraine, Trump or Kamala? And I just let them have it. I'm like, well, this first of all, nothing's going to change. I told them that, the wars will still continue. Of course, Trump is promising to bring negotiations, which I think is good. Like I'm pro that. Of course, I don't want people to keep dying in Ukraine. That's my home country. I want the war to stop. Obviously, the only way it's going to stop, like Ian said, is when they negotiate and they do some sort of agreement and settlement. And it's not going to happen with Kamala. So yeah, I told them that it's better. Trump is better for Ukraine, and then they didn't like my answer. So I even thought that they're not going to include it in their program, but they did include it. Of course, after they played a recording of another Ukrainian from California saying that Trump is a Hitler, evil, awful, and Kamala is the savior, and Kamala is the only one who can help Ukrainians and all that kind of stuff. So the majority of Ukrainians here who are new in the diaspora, they're liberals, and they are pro-Kamala, pro-Democrats.
They're liberals.
Yes, and then
that's a little surprising. I'm actually surprised. So they're liberals.
The people who have been here for years, they're Trump supporters because they've been part of this economy. They've been part of America for long to observe, to see what's happening, right, with the change of presidents. And they just this morning, I received a phone call from my friend, and she's like, Slava, did you vote already? I'm like, no, I'm not voting, but who are you voting for? And she's like, Trump, of course, Trump. So, and she's been here for years. And so, yeah, people who have been living here, Ukrainians, they see that Zelensky is corrupt and that nothing is coming, good out of the fact that he just comes here every year so and begs for more money. They're tired of this, and they understand that it's not good not only for Americans but also for Ukrainian people. They have families there. They see that people get drafted one after another, and they either disappear, they get killed, or they get injured. And like before, they had some rules, like we're not drafting younger than this age, and we're not drafting older than that, and people with disabilities and people with exemptions like students or parent of 3 children or parent of disabled person. Now they're going and drafting everyone. Like my stepbrother, he was drafted. He wasn't supposed to be in that situation because he has a disabled son that he takes care of. And now they want him to go and serve. So like they keep on going further and further. I wouldn't be surprised if they start taking 65-year-olds because they are running out of men. So the diaspora that have been here for long, they realize this and they want Trump to win because they really believe that Trump will stop, that he will put an end to this massacre. And unfortunately, all the new immigrants who are coming, they are so hot-headed and they're like, we need more money for Ukraine, and they don't understand the sentiment of American people. Like they can't sympathize with the problems of Americans. They just feel like they feel entitled. Oh, we came from war. We came from this situation, which is terrible. I understand. It's hard to come run from, be a refugee. It's not an easy thing. And see your family dying and all that. So I get it, but still, they're coming here. They're getting help, a lot of help. So they should at least try to put themselves in a position of American people that are helping them, and don't just say demand and keep demanding more and more. Not only demanding to help them because they came, but also help keep sending money to Zelensky, right? So yeah, it's kind of weird situation here with Ukrainians, but I feel like it's the same with any diaspora. It's not usually all on the same page. There's different generations in diaspora and they vote differently.
I think that's very interesting because I never would have guessed on that that split. And I do want to say, but I want to answer a question in the comments real quick. Where was that question? Okay, to answer the question. So right now, so David K is asking if they're going to lower the draft age to 18. Well, as of right now, it is 25. But allegedly, there is pressure from the USA specifically to lower it to 18. And I do know, like Lindsey Graham in particular has spoken that he doesn't understand. It's like, it's an existential fight to the death between Ukraine and Russia. Why are they not going all in and lowering the draft age to 18? Of course, that's very controversial because even on the Russian side, the average age of the people who were mobilized in the fall of 2022, the average age was 35. So I think because both Ukraine and Russia have been involved in World War II, and of course World War I, and the Civil War, where very large numbers of people were killed. There is, I think, even just a cultural aversion to sending the very young to battle because it's understood that a lot of them die. So they actually culturally prefer to send someone who's on the older side to war.
And then they don't have to pay pension.
Well, it's not even that. Just like, if you're 40, you've lived some life and you die, then, it is what it is. I think there's just because they are within a couple generations of a war like that, both Ukraine and Russia. And also Ukraine's, it's even worse than in Russia, the demographic crisis. That's the smallest generation in Ukrainian history, the 18 to 25-year-olds. They just don't have many of them. Many of them have already left the country. And I think there's just an understanding if they lose that generation, then that's it. It's game over. But Americans don't see that, and they don't. Let's be honest. No one in the USA actually cares about Ukraine. Well, why not? Why not send them? Why not conscript them? So
they even are considering drafting women now. Like the talks have been going back and forth because, there's shortage of workers in male workers in like. Traditionally speaking, like hardware stores, like people working with lumber, all that, it's been always men taking those jobs. Now there's no men, so women have to operate machines and all that kind of stuff. And so there are politicians in Ukraine who have been pushing and discussing this question, and there's a huge percentage of women who are considering that, like they want to be drafted. So I guess especially those whose family members have been killed or injured. Now they're like so bitter that they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go and do it myself. So I don't know. I mean, it's silly, but again,
there's a couple more questions in the chat. The first one I'll go to is because it's immediately related to Ukrainians. Are EU nations deporting Ukrainians back to Ukraine? Or is that just rumor? I would say right now it is just a rumor. There are several countries that are scaling back the welfare and humanitarian aids to Ukrainians, just saying you're not getting free housing, you're not getting this, you're spent your pocket money every month, which is pretty transparently just, or actually, I think a couple of countries have actually done that, say we'll pay you to go back to Ukraine. I think that's just encouraging them to go back to Ukraine. But as of right now, I'm not aware of anybody actually forcibly deporting the Ukrainian refugees back.
Only if a person commits some sort of a crime.
Yes,
so
Switzerland started deporting Ukrainian criminals back.
Yeah.
They also started deporting Syrian criminals. They used to just say I guess the worst they would do is put you in jail. They wouldn't actually deport you, but Switzerland deported several Ukrainians and several Syrians. But the reason they don't, if you're just an average person who hasn't committed a crime, as of right now, they're not deporting anybody. And the reason why is because the European Human Rights Council, it's actually against the European Human Rights Council to deport someone back to an active war zone now.
Yeah.
There's debate on whether or not Ukraine qualifies as a war zone. There's debate about it, but I've not heard of anybody actually forcibly deporting anyone unless they committed a crime. They did something to deserve being deported. And the second question was based on, it's from the same guy, from David K. How can Trump end the conflict? Like Slava said, Trump was saying, I could end it in one day. Well, of course, that's a Trumpism. That's an exaggeration. You couldn't literally end it in one day. But at the same time, what he's saying is true. And I think that's why that made Democrats and, pro-Ukraine people so mad, because honestly, it's true. Because the USA could basically immediately end the war in Ukraine. And the reason why is because Ukraine is completely dependent on NATO aid. Yeah. So yes, of course, the USA could say, well, we are ending the war on these terms. And as long as Russia agrees to those terms, Ukraine doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
They just don't have a choice. So Trump is correct to say that. The question is, could the president unilaterally, if the legislator would not cooperate with him, could the president unilaterally end it? I think
without coming down with a very bad case of lead poisoning.
You're right. That's a different question, but in principle, Trump is right. And Leo, you've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, Leo, we wanted to give you the next 20 minutes of a monologue, so
right.
We're going to listen.
I do have a question for you guys. How seriously do you take Trump when he says that he's going to launch a tariff trade war on the entire world? Not only China, but also Europe, and because everybody has been taking advantage of us and treating us as like their little, just all these fantasies. Like how seriously do you take him?
Hey, give me a half hour and I will explain. Just kidding. Let's hear from Slava.
I don't think he's gonna do anything. Yeah, I mean, he's just that's what people want to hear, and that's why he's saying it. But in reality, I don't think so. I mean, he himself has been manufacturing things in different countries and all that. Like it's to his class benefit. So I don't think he's going to do anything about it.
Especially after the results of the last trade wars that he started with China has already come back to bite people in the butt, right? American businesses, American corporations, right?
So I can take a shot at this question too, if you want. So Leo mentioned something that was Leo, you mentioned something a little while ago that was very interesting, which I meant to comment on, but didn't, but it's relevant to this. You were talking about this distinction in rich people, that Trump falls into the lower echelon of rich people. I met a lot of those people actually when I lived in Iowa. It's like there's one particular case. I used to work at a gun range, and we went out to have some beers at this bar. It wasn't anything special. It was just a random crappy bar in town. And one of my friends, this random guy who was kind of in a beat up old hoodie, came up and talked to my friend for a couple minutes. And then when he left, my friend said, "Oh yeah, that guy owns a factory. He's a millionaire." You wouldn't even know it from talking to this guy. He's just some dude in old beat up jeans and hoodie. You wouldn't know it, but he's a very wealthy person. And so I think that class of rich people specifically are probably driving the bus in putting that bug in Trump's ear. Yeah, we would like tariffs on not just China, not just the bad dictatorship countries, the whole world, Europe too. Fuck them. I don't personally think starting these pissing contests with other countries, especially China, is good. I don't care about Europe, honestly. I just like them. They can start a tariff war with Europe for all I care. I don't like them. But I don't think it's in general a good idea. But at the same time, I can see the logic, because that, like, actually Leo said the same thing. There's those people who really want to revitalize America's industry. And it's not necessarily the best solution, but the most obvious solution is just to put a crap ton of tariffs on imports. Because if you put tariffs on imports, well, what are you going to do? There's certain products you can't live without. If it becomes uncompetitive to import them, then you have to make them domestically. So I can see the logic in it. I don't know how likely it would be but I can see the logic in it. I will mention also that in Iowa, we have John Deere, which is one of the big farming equipment manufacturers. They're moving operations to Mexico, which is kind of ironic because, that's their whole brand, that we're American, we're super patriotic American industry, and they're relocating to Mexico because it's cheaper. Tariffs would punish companies for doing that. So on one hand, because I'm not an economist, I can't sit there and say whether tariffs are good or bad. I just look at it from the perspective of an American expat. I think trade wars, economic wars with other countries is a bad idea. So I look at it from that perspective. From an economic perspective, I can't say whether tariffs would be good or bad for revitalizing American economy. I don't have those expertise. But I don't know.
And I think, generally speaking, Trump's rhetoric is to be taken with a grain of salt because he will take both sides of every issue, simultaneously, and then he doesn't even know what he's going to do when he's in office.
But my main point is that I don't think that particular point is something Trump himself made up. I think there's that class of people in America's Rust Belt who have money, who are business owners, who are saying, we think this is a good idea. So I think
I remember seeing him with the interview with the Wall Street Journal guy, and he seemed pretty adamant, and he seemed pretty motivated regarding the tariffs, and he seemed pretty convinced that tariffs were a good idea. So that might be something that he would actually do. I mean, did you guys see that interview? Do you know what I'm referencing?
Yeah.
The Wall Street Journal guy.
I didn't know.
The guy's like, the guy's like, I want 6,000% tariffs on China right now.
Well, and the Wall Street Journal seemed to be representing that elite financier class, whereas Trump really did seem to be, representing the interests of those people that Ian was describing. But yeah, is that going to help? I think the U.S. is kind of beyond help. I mean, we're not going to bring manufacturing back to this country. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, all of this, it's just the desperation. It's pure desperation.
Yeah,
it's only desperation. It's nothing but desperation. I mean, the tariffs in the very, very immediate future, like short term, very extreme short term, maybe help a little bit in some industries, but like even in like the short term, it's a disaster. I mean, for U.S. American businesses,
generally
and long term,
speaking,
like forget about it.
I think, the U.S., instead of confronting our enemies, our supposed enemies, these threats to American hegemony, instead of confronting them, we need to cooperate with them. So instead of doing tariffs on solar panels from China, electric cars from China, we got to open up and allow these things to. So, I mean, I would like to buy a $15,000 electric car. The reason I can't buy it is because
it doesn't exist. Yes.
My government. No, well, my government won't let me. They exist. People are buying them in Europe. People are buying them in China.
Yes, not here in the USA, right?
Right, because the government, and so and because of our domestic industries can't compete with that, and so that was the whole thing. That's why they were shoving free trade down our throats, because it's going to help the consumer. It's going to be good for the consumer, and it destroyed our own manufacturing base. And now it's not even helping the consumer because now they're reintroducing tariffs. So all of these policies are designed to benefit the ownership class. And like Leo said, it's a little bit more complicated because there's strata of the ownership class. There's the financiers, and then there's the actual industrialists, and it is complicated. But ultimately, these policies are not done in the interest of the consumer, of the working class.
And in order to cooperate, to begin a path of cooperation and mutual benefit with our supposed enemies, U.S. Americans need to face their real enemies. Their real class enemies, which are in their own parliament and Congress and the government, and the people who control the government. Yeah. So we need something like Haz el-Din's Khanate to fucking roll over the establishment.
Right. It's about representation. We the working class lacks any representation. The bourgeoisie is totally represented. That's who our government represents, is the ownership class and the financiers. So until that changes, these policies aren't going to change. I mean, the size of the breadcrumbs might change a little bit, but ultimately we lack total control. We lack any control, and we're totally disenfranchised from the political system.
That's why I don't vote. I understand people who do. I tell them that. I'm like, I get your concerns, but me personally, as a Marxist, I don't vote. And that's also a position of our party as well. We at ACP, we don't vote.
So I've
never voted in my life.
I will want to say one thing we need to do when doing analysis is try to have some empathy and think in these people's shoes. And I think that's something that's not done enough. So, I mean, for one of us, we have some different political views here, but I think everyone here is kind of neutral. Like, we don't get upset or emotionally invested because, I don't think anyone here is a diehard Republican or a diehard Democrat or anything like that. Even the Americans here on this show, I don't think, so we're not emotionally invested. So we need to think as someone who is emotionally invested, which is why I'm skeptical of the whole theory that Trump is, they're just going to blame it all on Trump, because that requires the thinking of someone who's not emotionally invested. Like, so it might make sense to us. Oh, well, we could let Trump win and then blame Ukraine on him, blame Hamas on him, blame all this stuff on him. I mean, that's the attitude of a person who's not emotionally invested. But you have to, I don't think these people are lying, right? I don't think rich people are lying. I don't think the journalists are lying. I don't think the average working class person is lying when they think that, oh, Trump is literally Hitler. Like Leo said, I think they are going to, it would be great to see Trump win, just if nothing else, so they have the meltdown. All these people have a meltdown over it. I do think they believe, I don't think they're lying. They believe what they say. And so if that's a huge if, because I already said I don't think he's going to win, but if Trump did somehow win, I would say with a very high degree of confidence, is not because that was some deliberate choice by the puppet masters. I think it's just a state that the Democrats, the Tim Waltzes and Kamala Harrises of the world, were incompetent enough they actually genuinely lost to Trump. It was, I would say, it's definitely not a deliberate plan. They do sincerely believe what they say, and if they lose, it's not deliberate. So I don't know if anyone here disagrees with that.
Yeah, if sorry, go on.
I mean, no, I mean, they really, like, the Democrats really want to win, and the Republicans really want to win, and definitely the Democratic Party doesn't want to lose, and they're not throwing it, but I think, it's up for grabs. To a certain point, it's up for grabs, and I think you have, powerful influences and powerful lobbies within the establishment that can swing it one way or the other. So my whole point is that I think that the pro-Israel faction is going to swing it towards Trump and get the consensus on Trump's side. And I think that, his overt, over-the-top pro-Israel rhetoric makes them like him better than they like Harris. And Harris, has a Democratic base that is a lot of is pro-Palestine, and that disgusts these pro-Israel people. And so I think, and when I listen to Zionists, when I listen to their podcasts and things, they are absolutely hate Kamala, and they are really pro-Trump. And I think this might, be the difference in the election that we see. But that's just my conjecture. Leo, you were saying something before I got in there.
I was just going to say something about, actually the establishment would take a loss. I mean, I'm kind of debating within myself about how much Trump really represents a kind of anti-establishment force. I mean, I'm trying to think of how to word this, like a defeat, because they've really, like, Kamala Harris has zero clout. She was super unpopular as even district attorney, and as a senator, she was a senator, right? She has nothing, and these people, they just, like, Like the Democratic establishment, they just roll her out, and they think they can just through media and through propaganda just launch her into office. And
Yeah.
if somehow this doesn't work out, it kind of, to some degree, represents a kind of a collapse of legitimacy of the liberal establishment. I mean, liberal in the sense, yeah. Sorry, I'm a little bit debating within myself as well on some of these things. Never
Plus,
mind.
you're doing your
I'm just going to
bookkeeping
leave it
from
at
your
that.
great business. You're busy doing your bookkeeping from your great business while you're engaging with us, and we can plug that. Goods for the
No.
people.
Oh no! I wasn't doing that. I was doing something else. No. I was completely.
But that's okay. I'm not. It's not a complaint, sir. I was just taking the opportunity to plug your brand, Goods for the People. I bought 4 hoodies last Christmas for my family because it was getting colder. So I recommend people check out Goods for the People. You've got a great message. Each one of your products, you have a little bit of an essay written about philosophy and ideology, and it's really cool.
Yeah, goodsforthepeople.com. We're doing a Kickstarter, which is pretty important right now because it will launch us into much higher quality products, free shipping, and all of that. But yeah, using the global circulation of commodities to spread class consciousness and to realign rebel chic with Marxism. I mean, what can go wrong?
That sounds good.
And
I'll definitely check it out.
David K asks where we live. So I'm in California. Leo's in Berlin. Ian is in Moscow. And are you in Illinois as well, Slava?
Yes,
Okay,
I am.
so David K says he's in Illinois.
We're really bad at introducing ourselves in this show. We keep forgetting. I always forget.
I did a little bit at the beginning, but we don't get into great detail about who we are and what we do. And I'm okay with that because, I don't have popular.
Not to scare people, right?
Yeah.
I think if
we were
I say that I'm from ACP all the time, I talk to people, they'll be like, "What ACP? You're fascist."
You want to tell us about the convention? You guys just had a convention a week or so ago.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. It was awesome. For the first time, all of us got together here in Chicago. We got delegates from each chapter from all around the States and Canada, because ACP includes Canada as well. And we ratified our constitution, our party's program, our executives were speaking. It was great. Lots of work, of course, to prepare for the convention. I was doing a lot of running around because I'm here in Chicago, so finding the venue and everything. But it was a success. I was happy to see everyone, and what I liked the most about our convention was the next day after. Everyone who attended stayed for the next day, and we did a huge volunteer work in one of our biggest parks. It's actually one of the biggest parks in the whole country. It's called Humboldt Park. And that park has a lot of homeless, so hundreds of tents. People living in tents, and you know how it's already cold in Chicago. It's going to get even colder. So, what we did for a month in advance, we were doing a winter coat drive. So we were collecting all winter supplies, not just coats, but also scarves, gloves, hats, stuff like that. And then we set up the station. We were giving away all the supplies, and we also were doing food drive as well. So we cooked hot meals, we prepared sandwiches, we distributed around 500 coats and 300 meals, hot meals, and then also we cleaned up the park as well in the end. So that was a lot of work, and people were appreciating. The homeless population were happy that we gave them attention, and also lots of people who lived in the area were stopping by asking us what you guys are doing, because it was like 100 people out there doing something. So it was a good positive message. We're doing these kind of things on a smaller scale, each state separately, but this was just one time that we all got together, right? And it was a great experience working with fellow comrades, helping people. We're also doing something similar this week. We're going to Carbondale, Illinois, which is like 5-hour drive from Chicago. But they have homeless population over there too, and so we're just bringing food and winter supplies over there, and we're going to like target that one city, and little by little we're going to try to do it everywhere in our state, just to make some difference.
That's really heartwarming to hear. And also, I wanted to ask you something. Actually, we can also talk later. Maybe I can get your contact or something. A friend of mine or a comrade of mine from Spain was telling me that ACP is actively either toying with the idea or actively pursuing sort of overseas chapters of people with U.S. American Cheeseburgerstan passports. This is true?
Yeah. This is true. We didn't get to that yet, but of course, if there's American citizens living abroad, they're still American citizens, and they can join ACP as well. So that's true.
I'm glad to hear you're shattering these stereotypes of communists as being, lazy, basement-dwelling, self-centered, country-hating, jerks. So I mean, because there is a certain kind of stereotype like that about communists, but those are Western leftists. Those aren't real communists that describes. So that's great. I did watch. Now, where can we see the convention? I know I watched Eddie Liger's speech, if you want to call it that. It was really great. I agreed with his.
I think his speech is the only one uploaded so far. Okay. And he's in charge. He's our media executive, so he's in charge of editing and processing everything. And little by little, he'll be uploading one by one.
Okay. So other people spoke. I presumed they were available, but they'll be available at some point.
They will be available, yes. And yeah, our constitution and party's program are published already on our website. So anyone can go, and it's available to public. You don't have to be ACP member to read our constitution and the party program. They're there already.
.org, acp.com?
It's acp.us.
.us, okay. And I was going to say, Eddie's very busy, so it might take him some time to get all these out. Like, isn't he preparing for the Olympics or something?
He is, yeah. He's always wrestling. He's running. He's a coach, so he's teaching kids to wrestle. And but still, he's doing all his party responsibilities. He's coming actually tomorrow to Chicago. We are having a small-scale event on Thursday. I'm sure you're familiar. It's an anniversary of October Revolution, November 7th, because of the calendar, right? It's actually in November. So we're having a small ACP celebration on Thursday. Haz will come. He lives close by. He's from Michigan, so it's not hard for him to drive to Chicago. So he's coming. He's going to give a speech, and we'll just have like a social event celebrating the anniversary of a great October Revolution. So Eddie is going to come as well because he's from Iowa, and our other executive, Kyle Pettis, who is, I'm actually his deputy. He is our director of personnel. And he lives in Missouri. So all of them, like neighboring states, right, to Illinois, they come often to Chicago, and we have events here. So yeah, very, very exciting. I'm part of the Politburo, which means I'm helping the executive that I'm assigned with to do his tasks. So we're still doing interviews and accepting people to the party. It's lots of work, but we're not trying to just get anyone, right? We're not running after numbers. We want quality people.
Well, that's great. I know Xi Jinping tried to get into the Communist Party of China 6 times before they let him in. So it's good to be selected.
9 times as a politician, but there was already 5 times before that when he was a teenager. Wow. So 14 times he was denied.
Wow, I didn't realize. But no, it's important, like, to be selective. And I like Eddie's whole discussion was on, being, morally, upstanding, and not being a degenerate. But That's important. It's very important.
Well, I've smoked weed before. Is that okay?
I think it's
No.
okay.
It's okay, just don't do it anymore.
I mean,
I'm not planning on doing it anymore.
yeah. I quit drinking when I was 20, and I remember weed always made me paranoid, and so I quit smoking weed even before I was 20, and then when I was 20, I quit drinking. But so it's easy for me to condemn the degenerate drug users because I'm not one of them. But at the same time, like I don't really judge people. Like especially if you're able to do it, and function and live your life. Good for you. For me, it's best if I just avoid it because it's not anyway. So that's today is a big day. I mean, I'm going to be surprised if Kamala wins a little bit. Ian will be really surprised if Trump wins. It sounds like, and we may or may not find out today. It might drag on for weeks. But I do want to just thank Leo for coming. Slava, thank you. We will at some point find out who it's going to be, and then we'll all reconvene and have a discussion about this discussion.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you for having us.
So we will see, and then we'll be back Friday. I'm not sure right yet who our guests will be, but we will see everyone Friday. And how do I end my stream? Okay, here it goes. We'll see you then. Thank you.